My name's Carolyn Kennett and I'm an astroarchaeologist, and we're here today on Bodmin Moor visiting the Hurlers stone circle complex as well as some of the surrounding features. The Hurlers are set in quite an extended prehistoric landscape with a large amount of megalithic monuments which have been here since the Neolithic and early Bronze Age. So we're talking about 4,000 years old to the early Bronze Age. I'm going to be talking today to an archaeologist called Jacky Nowakowski and an astronomer called Sheen, and we will be discussing the way that the Hurlers has been built and some of its features, as well as how these relate to the night sky. Hi, I've now got the pleasure of introducing Jacky, who's an archaeologist and was the project developer of a number of digs here at the Hurlers. Jacky, can you tell us a little bit about how you discovered how interesting the Hurlers was and wanted to work here?
Yes, well, it all goes back to the time when I found the excavation archive of the work that was done here in the 1930s by an archaeologist called Raleigh Radford, and he was employed by the Ministry of Works to tidy up the stone circle complex, because over 80 years ago a lot of the stones here were lying down and some of them had disappeared. So there were two excavations here in the mid-30s, and those excavations were all designed to bring the Hurlers back to life and to put the stones back upright.
So this is how they ended up looking today?
That's right, and we're standing on the edge of the central circle at the moment, and
Yeah.
behind us is the northern circle. And these were the two circles that were looked at in 1935 and 1938.
Right, okay. And then you discovered something else in those archives as well?
We did, which was quite a surprise, because we found that not only had they looked at the circles themselves, but the archaeologists at the time, they looked at the space between the central circle and the northern circle.
Right, okay. And what did you discover that was so exciting?
Well, what's exciting was they found what looked like an extraordinary stone pavement linking the two circles. Well, I looked at it and I thought, well, something's got to be done. We've got to try and do something with this. So I talked to English Heritage and the Duchy of Cornwall, who managed this site.
Yeah.
And I talked to the Carolyn Heritage Area Project, who was doing a project here, a community project at the time. And I said that it would be really good to do something with the archive and to have a look at the Hurlers again.
And so was this a community project then?
That's right. So with the Carolyn Heritage Area Project, I developed an idea to re-expose this the space between the central and the northern circle, to look again and see if we could find what was found here in the 1930s.
Can we have a look where it runs from?
Yes. So what we're doing is walking along the line of the area, the space between the central circle behind us and the northern circle in front of us. And just in front of us here, we opened up quite a long trench over about 20 metres and about 2 metres wide. And under the turf, which we took away, we found again, well preserved, this stone pavement that was found in the 30s.
Right, okay. And so how wide did the pavement run?
Well, it was very unusual, really. It doesn't run through the circles, it stops within this gap. There was a curb at one end, and it was just under 2 metres wide and about sort of 13 or 14 metres long.
So that's quite significant. Do you think they used it to walk upon? Or?
Well, it was very intriguing. In the 1930s, the guys who exposed it saw it, or they interpreted it as a ritual procession between the two circles. So I thought that was very interesting. One of the things that we discovered, obviously, is that A, it's well preserved under the ground, and B, it's made up of lots of different types of granite and quartz stones.
Right, okay. So it had different colours to it, or? Yes,
quite remarkably, and all very well packed together, forming a very, very compact surface. But the thing about the surface, it was all lumpy bumpy. It wasn't a levelled surface. So to call it a pathway or a pavement would be a bit misleading.
Right, okay. And do you think it was here before the circles, or is that difficult to tell?
Well, I think one of the things that we wanted to find out is whether it was still here and whether there was any means by which we could date it. And remarkably, in amongst the tightly packed stones, we found a few flint tools.
Right. Okay.
Some prehistoric tools,
And
which gave us. Which were very exciting to find because they had obviously been placed here over 4,000 years ago. So
right.
we associated them with the use of the pavement.
That is really exciting.
So all these finds were found, some of them were found here in the 1930s, and we found some more with our work on the pavement in 2013.
So this one's quite interesting because it looks almost like a little sharp.
Yes, it's a blade.
So that's a blade.
It is a blade, and it's got what we call retouch. It's worked on both sides. So that would have been hafted in maybe a bone or a wooden haft of some sort. So that really is very distinctive, and that's probably 4,500 years old.
Wow. And this one here, this one's quite unique as well. I know it's one of the smaller ones.
Yes. So this was found by us again. This is the tip of a flint arrowhead.
Right,
and
okay.
that was found by us during our work here, and it's been snapped, so it's been deliberately broken. So rather than which shows actually that it's never been reused.
Yeah.
So it's been
so why would they deliberately break something?
Oh, well, that's a very good question. That's a very good question. Certainly for the prehistory, when we find objects at places like the ceremonial sites where people would bring objects for exchange, sometimes they would render them useless in some form of ritual, and that was all part and parcel of the way that people gathered and exchanged ideas.
Okay. And you said some of these were from the 1930s excavation as
That's
well.
right, yes, and it's I think there's something over 30 flints from both the work done on the central circle and the northern circle, so this represents one of the largest collection of flint tools found on a stone circle complex in Cornwall.
That's really significant, isn't it?
It is.
Jacky, thank you so much for introducing me to why the Hurlers is so special archaeologically, and to the wonderful intercircle link which you were instrumental in re-exposing and finding so much out about.
Well, thank you, Carolyn, for the opportunity to tell you about it. It's been an absolute pleasure.
I'm now talking to Brian, who works for the Roseland Observatory and Cornwall Sea to Stars. He is an astronomer, and he's worked for many years here at the Hurlers alongside the archaeologist, looking at how the Hurlers relates to the night sky.
It's like so many things about astronomy in Cornwall, it all relates back to the eclipse of 1999. The archaeology unit in Cornwall produced a leaflet describing the wonders of various solstice sunrises and sunsets and so on. And of course the Hurlers was one of the sites mentioned. So I thought it's about time that we actually went round and see whether there are any other things that we could discover and unravel on these sites.
And did you find out anything about the solstice points and the Hurlers?
We certainly did. We actually were a little bit disappointed in the solstice points right here.
Right.
Because it isn't well placed for that. But we then did discover that it was a cardinal point site.
Okay, so what do you mean by a cardinal point site?
It starts off with being north.
Yeah.
It's the main site, and we've got Stow Hill behind us, which is north of this site. We've discovered a cairn, which is on the southern side of the site. That seems to be in a straight line there. And surprise, surprise, Kit Hill, where I was actually brought up, is to the east of the site.
And we've got a position behind us here where that is particularly accurate. So we're going to take a little wander over there and take a look at that. So Brian, the position that you're stood on is quite interesting. This stone here is quite a flat base, but in front of it we have this small central stone. Can you tell me something about where you're stood and how it relates to that stone?
Right, well I think this particular stone was possibly placed here, relevant to the smaller stone ahead of us, because it looks then directly at Kit Hill, which is a halfway point between north on Stow Hill and south on the mound behind us.
So that's directly to the east or
Directly
thereabouts.
near enough.
So that's also interesting with the solar calendar as well.
Oh yes, yes. They were perfectly on for what they needed, which is defining the seasons. And that really was the sort of background to all the work that they were doing to find out when the weather was improving or going the other way.
And this central stone isn't quite how it was back in the Bronze Age. So do you want to tell me a little bit about that as well?
Yes, we think that stone was a little bit taller or set not quite so low. Remember when Raleigh Radford was working here, this particular stone was lying alongside rather than being stood up. They managed to find its post hole and put it back where it belongs. And you will notice that it's not exactly in the centre of this circle at all. I think that's to keep a clear space. Any shadows cast by the southern sun had somewhere to go or extend out into the circle towards the middle, which undeniably would have been a focal point for the people that were taking an interest in this particular stone and its progress throughout the year.
What you've just been saying about this stone has been really fascinating, but can you also tell me a little bit about the shadows that it casts throughout the year, please?
Right, well, if we start at now time, which is the summer solstice, then we'll find that the sun rises quite close to north and then comes around in a circle. But it's actually casting a shadow in front of the stone.
Right, okay.
And as the year goes by, those shadows get longer and change subtly in shape until we get to the winter.
And that's because the sun is sinking lower
lower
to the south and not arcing so high in the air, and
Absolutely.
it casts such a longer shadow
Much
there.
longer shadow.
So we're back at the Intercircle Link with Brian, the astronomer, and would you like to tell us a little bit about what was discovered during the map in the sun? Someone made an observation that the Intercircle Link looked a little bit about a night sky object.
Yes, they thought perhaps it represented the Milky Way. That to most people was a bit of a far-flung idea, but until you look into it more closely, you realise that it has some merit to it. And indeed, the pathway doesn't start right to the middle circle. It starts some way away, and that's because you cannot see the Milky Way down to the true horizon. And at this end, then it straggles, but it also points up the hill to where we have the Rillerton Barrow, where in the 19th century they discovered a gold cup and a skeleton and a dagger and so on. So it was clearly the burial site for a very important person.
So it almost represents a pathway through the site, through all the two lower circles, through this one, through the upper circle to the Barrow. And that's interesting with the Milky Way, because it's often been said in other cultures that the Milky Way represents a pathway, can we say, to the dead?
To the dead, yes, indeed you can. It's the Mayans and people like that had this similar idea, and whereas I don't believe that there's a connection between the two peoples, nevertheless the ideas obviously coincide pretty closely.
So we've moved off a short distance from the Hurlers now, and we're stood in front of another monument which is only a few steps away. Can you tell me a little bit about these? What are they called and why do you think they're here?
Well, they're called the Pipers, and they're part of the story of the Hurlers themselves. If you recall, the Hurlers were people that were turned to stone for dancing on the Sabbath, and the Pipers were providing the accompanying music. Believe that if you will.
Okay, and do they have a purpose, do you think?
Yes, we think so. Certainly that we believe that they were erected during the Bronze Age, which is some 4,000 years ago now, and what they actually do is frame a Stow Hill perfectly, and that of course is due north of this particular site.
Okay, that's fascinating. And so if they're framing Stow Hill, what else are they doing?
What also they do is, if you look along the line from one stone to the other, obviously that's facing east or west according to where you actually position yourself.
So that's fascinating, because that's another cardinally aligned monument next to the Hurlers themselves.
Absolutely. Yes, ancient and modern, the hymn to archaeology, or some such.
On the horizon, behind these there's bushes in the foreground. Between the two circles there's a big tree.
Have a quick peep. Yeah, I got it.
We've just set up these two pieces of equipment. Can you tell me a little bit about them and what they're for?
Right, what we're trying to do is to measure what we call the horizon profile. That's all the ups and downs and bumps that there is as you swing around through 360 degrees. And in order to get that correctly, we do need a compass. This one is a fairly obvious and large one, but others will do. And then to make sure that that's set up on north precisely, and then we have a small telescope to allow us to identify exactly which part of the horizon is due north.
Okay, and so then you were using this one, so
Yes,
what's this one for?
Yeah, in conjunction with this, we also have a level indicator as well, so we can tell how high or what the elevation is of the particular hill that we're looking at.
Okay.
This one is used to identify with a deal more precision the positions of sunrise and sunset at the solstices. And if we can find a particular hill in those areas, then we can say that that's where the sun rose at any given time back in history.
Thank you for introducing us to the Hurlers and how it's linked to the night sky. I know we've only touched on a small amount of it today, but I would like to say thank you very much, and I'm sure we could explore some further detail down the line.